welcome. I'm Eric Miscoll, and welcome to this edition of the virtual Eric Miscoll Show, the first for 2022, actually. We are without Phil Stoughton, my usual co-host today. He is otherwise engaged, but he will be back for further editions later this year. Our topic today is the Chinese New Year 2022. It is almost upon us, the year of the tiger. And so I wanted to speak to some gentlemen on the ground over there about the impact. Both of these gentlemen, who I'll allow to introduce themselves here in a moment, are on the ground in Asia. Both have commented about the impact that the coming year of the tiger will have on the electronics supply chain. So I thought it'd be a good to bring them on. Obviously, planning for Chinese New Year hopefully has happened. So we're not going to be offering any great advice to say this is what you need to do today, because it's here, beginning January 31st. It's a 7-day event, I believe. The formal part, right? It's 7 calendar days beginning on January 31st, running through February 6th of this year. And it's always fascinating to me because I think it's an annual event, but I think it's also probably the world's biggest voluntary kind of migration each year, right? Where the number of people who are moving around on a voluntary basis is pretty astronomical, and it certainly has an impact on the industry we all work in. So before we get into all of this, let me introduce our guests. We have Carl Hung, the CEO of Season Group, back with us by popular demand. Carl is in Hong Kong. And for the first time on my show, but certainly he's been on shows with Phil before, it's Cees Engelen, the CEO of TITOMA, based in Taiwan. So gentlemen, thank you both for taking some time today to speak with us. For the benefit of our audience, I always allow you to introduce yourself. Cees, as the first timer on the show, I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself first, please.
Thanks a lot for having me, Eric. Yeah, so my name is Cees. I'm from the Netherlands originally. I've been in Taiwan and China for about 25 years now. And TITOMA, time to market, helps companies to do the complete design and manufacturing of their electronics products. And so we do mostly embedded products for B2B companies.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Carl?
Thank you for my singular fan for demanding my presence back in the show. Appreciate that, Eric and Phil. Yes, I am Carl, CEO of Season Group, and we are a EMS provider / ODM with manufacturing facilities in China, in Malaysia, in the UK, and also in Mexico.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Before we get into the impact of China, I want to start with Chinese New Year. Apart from the electronics manufacturing, and just about the significance of this event to the Chinese people, right? What is China? I mean, this is, I think, the largest holiday and most significant, I guess is the better term, within China for the Chinese people. Carl, can you maybe comment on that and give us some context?
Well, this, like you say, it's the singular biggest holiday for us. We don't really celebrate Christmas or Thanksgiving over here. It is Chinese New Year. And with the Chinese population, we're very migrant mentality. We don't really live and work at the same place. We always travel to where we work and we stay there for the entire year. So we only get to see our family members once per year, generally during Chinese New Year's. So it is a very significant effect because I think COVID's highlighted it for a lot of people. You don't get to see your family members as much as you used to. You can't hop on a plane and fly back like it used to be. And so people get the sense now, they understand the worker mentality, that it's tough to be away from family members 11 months of the year. So that's why you've got how many 100 million workers all going back home to see their family members during Chinese New Year's, which is based on the lunar calendar. So every single year, it is a different time for us. So it's a little bit more difficult to plan as well, too.
Yeah, good point. Cees, anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, yeah, it's only the only real holiday there is, and the planning for me is a bit unfortunate because it's not in the summer, but in very very season. So the Chinese holiday is really spent with family, eating and then having dinner and lunch and spending a lot of time with family and friends and all sorts of friends and uncles, and they all come and visit each other. That's really what it's all about.
And as far as the migration itself, or the transportation, when people go back home, like you just said, Carl, you can't just jump on a plane these days. So a lot of that is by I'm assuming by rail, by bus, however, and that it's a lengthy migration depending on where the people may have come from.
Yes, I think for most people, the cost of a flight is too overburdening as well too. So many people take the bus, take the trains, and those tickets are bought months ahead of time. And with COVID right now, the restrictions on the bus and the trains are quite restrictive. If you just so happen to be in an area where it is flagged as a medium risk, our health code is in a 3-color system, so green, yellow, red. So if it's red, you're not allowed to leave your home. If it's yellow, you can't take any public transportation. If it's green, then you can go on to these public transportation. So you hope and pray that your health code never turns to yellow, which is what I was doing before my return to Hong Kong before Christmas, just hoping it stays green.
Yeah. And tell me, what about, what's the attrition historically then? I'd imagine if a lot of people go home, maybe life has changed and somebody says, maybe I'd like to stay home and not go back to the factory. I mean, how is that historically?
Historically, it's very, very high. I think generally speaking, we're talking about 40 to 50% easily from a direct labor standpoint. The IDL, the staff is quite low, but from a DL standpoint, generally for the past 10 years, all of the workers, they've banked on the fact that there is a 20 to 30% salary increase every year. So if you consider that there's a salary increase, a lot of times they think, oh, instead of taking a week off, I'll take a month or 2 months off, and then I'll look for a better job. So there really is not much loyalty in the past in China. With that said, there's been a major dynamic shift in China as well, too, with the younger generation, where for them, with social media, they get the sense that you can really make it rich quite easily now. You go on to Taobao, you go on to Alibaba, you start becoming a KOL, key opinion leader, and you can make money relatively easy. And billions. So sorry, Case?
Billions of renminbi.
Billions, yeah, yes. I think the bill, the tax bill for one was 700 million renminbi for one guy. But people see that, young generations see that, and so they're not really motivated to work long-term, 20, 30 years. This might be a short-term gap. So for them, none of them are signing long-term contracts. They're all working off of temporary workers contracts, which means they can resign and not show up to work the next day. And we're paying significant premium over that, where the attrition turnover since last year has been extremely high as a result.
I also, my neighbor, he used to be a manager of a factory in China for Delta, power supply maker. And he said that they had a turnover of 10% every month, like continuously the whole year. So they every month they would have a new class of employees that were being taught. And yeah, the workers in factories, I mean, it's not terribly exciting work. So they do that until they get married, usually. It's for them, it's a bit the chance to see something of the country. If you're from Hunan, then you go to Shenzhen and see that. But maybe then next year you want to see Shanghai or something and go someplace else. And especially girls, once you get married, you're going to stay put. And so they want to move around a bit and experience different sides of the country.
That's interesting. So when I think of it, and so again, not looking at this next year, but just kind of from a historical perspective, the impact for electronics manufacturing has always been, everybody says plan before because it's going to be, right, you're not going to get anything. Does quality suffer as a result of Chinese New Year historically as well, both kind of leading up and maybe ramping back up afterwards? What's the impact there?
Case?
Carl, you want to go there?
Oh, sure. Yes. I think leading up to Chinese New Year's, generally it's been fine. It's usually the post-Chinese New Year timeframe when you have an influx of the 30–40% new workers coming in, doing something they've never done before, and then having to train them on these tasks. For us, we're a high mix low volume manufacturer, so it's not steady work all the time. So all the line changes that we have, we generally have to double up on our IPQC process as well to have a lot of quality checks during the February, March, April standpoint, just to ensure that nothing leaks out to the customer. But we'll catch it all within the factory, and you see it. The internal quality does suffer quite a bit, and it's understandable. It's mundane work that should be automated.
Right. Case, what were you going to add, sir?
Yeah. Well, ahead of Chinese New Year, most people, they just want to get all the stuff out of the door, clean up everything, and they're not very eager to start new projects. And afterwards, yeah, well, like Carl had already said, you're gonna see some issues. What also is a factor for some factories is that if your project manager happens to leave, or your head of firmware programming, that can really screw up things quite a bit. And especially for higher personnel, there's the bonus system, where at Chinese New Year they get maybe a month's salary bonus, or if you work for TSMC, you get 20 or 30 a month's bonus. And so people wait until they get that bonus, and then they start looking for another company. So that is, especially in Taiwan, quite a reason for a lot of turnover in more senior personnel as well. And documentation is not always fantastic. A lot of details tend to be in the PM's head. So that is also something you have to be careful about.
Interesting. Yeah, and you make a good distinction there between Taiwan and mainland China, right? That obviously the migration within Taiwan, I'm assuming, is more limited as far as, you know, within the island contained, or
yeah, it's a small island.
Yeah, I mean, comparatively. So the extent that people are traveling is, the impact may be just as real, but the extent of the travel is not as it is on mainland.
No. It's in Taiwan. It's really, it's just a week and then it's over, and you got a lot of traffic jams, but that's basically it.
So is the attrition, as Carl was saying, within mainland China just as profound in Taiwan afterwards, or?
Yeah, not as in general. I think you find that in China, workers are really quite aggressive, looking for that 3% extra or 5% extra there, and hopping from the next job to the next to the next. Whereas in Taiwan, I think a lot of personnel is more stable. So I think in general the attrition is quite a lot less in Taiwan.
Okay. Well, let's talk about this year. was curious. Both of you have commented, and I've seen you know, mostly on LinkedIn, some of your writings and blogs talked about how this year could be more difficult than in previous years. And I think to summarize some of the issues I've seen, COVID. We talked about the power cuts issues. We talked about component shortages. That's a challenge everywhere, and then also the transportation issues associated with all this. So. Carl, maybe I start with you. How do you assess this year as compared to the others based on these?
I hope there's this will be the worst year ever, and nothing compares to it in the future. That's my hope, because it will be really bad. I think that the timing of the Chinese New Year, you can't really choose it, but you've got the Chinese New Year's coming. You've got Beijing Olympics coming, right? So around that area in Beijing, a lot of the pollutant factories are all shut down 2 months ago because they need to keep the environment clean. So government's already given incentives saying you can't open for the next 2-3 months. That's already happened. And that's going to hurt a lot of supply chain matters as well too. I think with Omicron and the way that in China we have a zero COVID policy. So if you have one case, you're shut down. Now the biggest
The whole
issue
province
is
gets shut down, and like 14 million people need to stay in lockdown.
you're talking about Xi'an right now. Xi'an's the biggest city in Shanxi, all shut down, and it's been 14 days. Right, every day there's around 100 to 90 cases or so, but they shut down that the city. And in Xi'an, you have Samsung, you have Micron. Right, so again, those two parts, if you have those on your bomb, good luck with them. Samsung, Micron, they're talking about trying to outsource it to contract manufacturers, and I think I'm frozen.
Oh, no,
You're still working
good.
for me.
Oh, okay, I was going to swear. Okay, good thing I didn't then. Yeah, Samsung, Micron's gone, shut down, and they're looking to outsource, but there's no way anyone has any capacity right now. TSMC, they're all capped out, right? Hopefully they can move it to another Samsung facility, but frankly speaking, the way that it works in China when you're locked down is that you can only send things in. You can't send anything out. So you can't move your tooling outside those cities. And that's what's not discussed in the news.
Interesting. Case, what did you want to add there? I see you nodding.
Well, Omicron is highly contagious, and I've seen some dire scenarios where because the population in China is one of the least exposed in the world, so that there's no herd immunity, they've all had Sinovac, the locally developed vaccine, which seems not to be all that effective against Omicron. So
But you had, Carl, I saw that, yeah.
Yep, 2 shots, Sinovac.
Okay.
But now in the West, everybody is sort of saying, well, maybe Omicron is sort of the later stage. It's a mild form, highly contagious, but yeah, that means at least everybody's going to get it, and then everybody will be resistant. And in China or in Taiwan is we're like virgin territory. In Taiwan, there have been 0 cases for the last 2 months or so. 0 cases locally, but every day there's like 10 or 20 cases that came in from flying in from the outside that have been tested negative from wherever they were tested. But once they arrive in Taiwan, they do test positive. So it could get, I mean, once Omicron slips through the nets and starts to infect other cities, then and China continues with their stringent lockdown or zero COVID policy, it's, I mean, you could have bang, 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 one city after another.
Wow. Yeah,
That's the doomsday scenario.
And Casey mentioned this as well too, with NPI and all that pre-CNY and post-CNY too. What we're seeing right now, it's NPI is suffering quite a bit because for anyone coming into China, you're 21 days at least, right? I think there's a case where some guy had a 28 or a 35-day quarantine, but no one's going to fly into China to do NPIs anymore because you have to be stuck in a hotel room. So I think companies need to be innovative on how they're doing their NPI procedures. You can't go off and buy off the parts from a tool anymore. You have to do it virtually. You have to do more measurement reports, better designed mechanical parts. All that stuff needs to be done better virtually as opposed to relying on flying over.
I mean, a very practical measure is just having somebody in the factory with their cell phone and going like this, and it's a bit stupid, but it works. That works fairly well for us.
Yeah.
I would imagine too that you know, services and consultants on the ground that can also help. I know that there've been I forget the name of it, Supply Chain Resource Group always talked about having that, right? The old, and having people on the ground who can act on your behalf. So maybe it's a boon to those types of businesses as well. Although I don't know to what degree they're free to travel around China. Maybe they're stuck within regions. So.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
that's factory audit, I think, or doing a in-process quality, a final quality check. But in the NPI stage, most of the drawings aren't finalized yet. The BOM's not finalized. You don't have a test plan, and to do it virtually, you have to be pretty good at communicating in a different language.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
actually, one of you had commented, or I saw something about the communications during Chinese New Year's is pretty tough because nobody's around to answer phones, right? Pretty much everything is shut down, right? So if you have somebody in the West who's calling, screaming, saying what's going on, they're probably not going to get a response.
Well, the answer is nothing is going on.
Really, it is. And go ahead.
Yeah,
No, no.
well, I was just going to comment on that. Because of COVID as well, too, and this happened last year as well. China government is trying to discourage the migration, and for them, they can't actually mandate saying you can't go home. But what they can do is give influence, give pressure to manufacturers, saying you have to pay the 3x bonus during Chinese New Year to keep them working. So it's already happened in Dongguan area where we're paying the 3x bonuses to keep everyone in the factory.
I've heard in Shenzhen, people with kids in school, the kids are obliged to be in their school area, I don't know, a week ahead of the school starting again. So effectively they cannot leave.
Yeah, so all schooling becomes a dorm factor. You can't go home anymore. You're stuck there for the entire term. If you get sick, it's a school getting sick. It doesn't leak out.
Wow. And clearly, with all this happening, we've had this historic material supply chain calamity for the last year, right? Brought about a lot by various factors, including the COVID, as we're talking about. And then the transportation issue, just moving things around for the shipping, not just the shipping, but I'm assuming also the rail and the trucking within the country. Is this all just a calamity?
There's a big shortage of containers. I've heard there's now in China also one factory that started to make one-way containers. You throw them away after they arrive in LA or something, and that is a major shortage. There's even a shortage of pallets. So that's a big factor. But on the other side, if you're shipping to the US, trucking in the US is also, or offloading stuff in the ports in the US, there's plenty of ships waiting to be offloaded, and then the trucks to get the stuff into the country. There's really big delays there as well.
No.
And aside from boats as well, too, from an air freight standpoint, right now in China and in Hong Kong, because of the quarantine requirements, it's different for crew members and also civilians. But they're tightening up the crew members' requirements, and that's really killing the air freights. Cathay Pacific has canceled all long-haul flights, long-haul cargo for the next month or 2 months. And it's going to mean that there's a lot less air freights coming out in Hong Kong. I think it was UPS. They've also shut down their Hong Kong headquarters. Hong Kong is no longer the Asia headquarters. It's now Singapore. So that's changed the dynamic as well too, because who wants to board a plane, fly into a city and have to quarantine for 14 days before flying out? It kind of doesn't make sense. So it's causing airlines a lot of hassle on how to deploy their personnel. And naturally, air freight costs have gone through the roof as a result. Instead of diverting via Hong Kong, companies right now, you have to think about, oh, can we fly from China to Bangkok, China to Singapore, etc., and into Hong Kong, China, similarly. But for a lot of companies like ourselves or for the foreign companies, what that means is an incremental cost on your your bill of material, because you have to pay the VAT upfront and then claim it back at year end, and you lose 0.5 point to 1 point as a result of that. Whereas if going through Hong Kong and into China, it's all VAT free.
Case, did you want to add anything to that?
No.
Okay, just checking with. Listen, I'd like to get your assessment of something. As I said at the beginning, Chinese New Year, it's an annual event. We go through this and have been going through this ever since China became the factory to the world, right?
And long before.
And like, yeah, well, it was happening before, but the impact, right, has been from electronics manufacturing is my focus here. How would you assess the industry as a whole kind of this year as having prepared for this particular Chinese New Year that we're about to head into?
Oh yeah, I mean, the shortage of components, that really is the biggest factor now, and that is where if you have 52 weeks lead time on your controllers, then that really is a much bigger problem than yeah, a couple of weeks factory shutdown or retraining. So in that sense, it's a bit minor to me. And yeah, for the components, redesign is often the only option. And for example, we like to work a lot with STM32 microcontrollers, and they're just not available. They even don't want to give a lead time anymore. So we have now trialed with a local Chinese equivalent Giga devices, and they work well.
They're 51 instead of 52 weeks lead time. Yeah.
Sorry?
They're 51 weeks instead of 52 weeks lead time.
Good. Oh, you're a good negotiator.
Progress. And that's, I was kind of wondering, I mean, what I'm trying to get at is there must have been over the years here, for the last years, better tools or technologies that are helping to minimize the impact. I get it about the component supply chain issues. It's kind of a historic bad right now. But the preparation for the anticipation of the manufacturers there, are there better tools in place that are allowing for the planning, for the ordering, for the whether it's software tools, supply chain planning tools, those types of things that are anticipating this in a better way and allowing people to minimize the impact in some way? You're smiling.
Yeah, the best thing is to say to your customers, make sure that you have all your stuff before, because there will be an impact, and that's a pretty simple tool. But maybe Carl, do you have something very sophisticated there?
I was going to ask you guys if you have any leads, help me out here. Yeah. The best friend that anyone has right now is findchips.com and octopart.com, right? It's no longer about buying lead time parts. It's spot buys. Who can buy spot buys fastest? That's the key factor here. And I'm stupidly optimistic in a sense. Hopefully in March, the Federal Reserve will increase the interest rates. And I think once the interest rates do go up, I think that the supply chain issues will ease up, because right now I feel most of the hoarding are done by speculators. It's one of the best investments right now to be making, because a 1 cent part can sell for $100. I don't know of any other investment you can do that can do that. But with components you can. So I think a lot of speculators are playing around with it when money is free. But once you have to pay interest rates, it should ease up a bit.
Mm-hmm. They have said that they're expecting at least 3 this next year, and some people think it may be more than 3 jumps, right? So, but
well, I think it's needed because inflation's through the roof right now.
Absolutely. No, we see that every day. Case, I'm sorry, you were going to add something there on what Carl was saying.
Well, I don't know. If you stand to make 5,000%, then I don't know if 3% interest is going to do much.
We're in the wrong business. Yeah.
Well, clearly. So how long the impact coming out of Chinese New Year? What can people expect? I mean, yeah, and I don't even want to call it to return to normality, because we don't even know what normality is anymore, right? What the new normal is debatable these days. But coming out of it this year, what should people expect in regards to production?
I think within about 3 weeks after Chinese New Year, the factories I work with should be pretty much back to normal, except for the component situation. That is the big story for the last year and a half. That is really what is the major blocking factor for us.
Mm-hmm.
Carl?
And from our end, our factories aren't shutting down. We're running through Chinese New Year's. We've ordered material on our part as well too. So hopefully we can last the month of February without significant material shortages. But again, we don't know what factories will be shut down after the Chinese New Year's. Right now, China seems to be very strict on their zero COVID. So Xi'an's the first one to be shut down. The town that I was next to, because I'm in Dongkeng, Dongguan. The next town to us is Dalang, Dongguan. They shut down Dalang as well too. And we had 4 vendors there, and we had to be creative in getting parts out, but they couldn't run their factories either. So it's a mixed bag right now. It's very hard to tell exactly how to proceed out of the Chinese New Year's. I think with COVID, with the supply chain shortages, people have been placing orders ahead of time already. So our February, March, April, even to September, POs are already all covered. So the customers have planned ahead of time. It's us reacting well. It's us and talking to the customers, because right now the issue is the semicon guys, the component suppliers, they can push back deliveries to you at any given time, because they can. And so don't hesitate on that spot buy. If you find the components, even if it's 5,000% case, we have to buy it. Otherwise, your factory shut down. Cost is much higher.
And of course,
Yeah,
the
and
manufacturers are not working during this time. They're shut down during Chinese New Year's as well, right? They're not. Right?
Sorry,
there's not production going on the component suppliers, the manufacturers themselves either.
They'll be open at a limited capacity, because I think the government is pushing that 3x OT payment. So they'll be open, but you still can't control it, because they did the same thing last year. So it would be in total 2 or 3 years for someone to not see their family. And that is tough. So some will say, I don't care if it's 3 times the salary, I'm still going home.
Yeah, I'm out.
I haven't seen my family for 2 years.
It's tough. It's very tough. Especially as we talk about the kids that suffer the most from this COVID thing. It's not us adults, we can live by, but to be able to hug your family members during a Chinese New Year or Christmas or Thanksgiving, it makes this all worth it. Otherwise, it's sad.
No, it truly is. I mean, that's for a lot of it. That's our why, right? That's why we do what we do, is for them. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, my children of 2 and 5, they really want to see their grandmother, but yeah, it's just Skype and Zoom, and it's really sad for them.
Yeah,
luckily,
very good
what is good here is that here in Taiwan the schools are going on, and so people are continuing to be social with their classmates and everything. And that in the West can be quite an issue. I've heard a lot of reports on people falling back there. So there's pros and cons to both approaches.
So you've both made comments about how you're working with your clients. You know, Casey, you're talking about the redesign. Carl, you're talking about getting the spot buys, right? You're doing your best to get and keeping the factories open and continuing to work with that. Are there any other ways that you've kind of been working with and preparing your clients to try to minimize the impact of what we're about to head into?
Well, one of the issues when people ask us for new quotes or just can you re-quote this product I made a year ago is that quotes are valid for like 2 days or so. Like a lot of component manufacturers, the prices are spot, right? And so I can quote you this price today, but that doesn't mean that it's gonna be that price or available at all a week from now. So that is something that is, yeah, a new reality.
Yeah.
Well, on that case, we're getting pre-approvals. So for a certain percentage above, we'll go ahead and buy it right away because it's within 6 to 12 hours, it's gone right now.
Yeah.
So we can't. But I think one of the key things I would recommend manufacturers and OEMs and all that stuff, hire firmware engineers. Those are the most important engineers you have right now. Find a good firm, sign them up exclusivity, buy them out, do something with firmware because you can buy all the alternatives you want, but if you can't change your firmware, it doesn't matter. So it's the firmware engineers that are critical right now.
Our guys are really busy. That's true. But one of the issues we have an office here in Taiwan, and we have another office in Latin America, in Colombia. We want to bring 4 engineers here to Taiwan, but they have work permits, but they cannot come into the country because of, yeah, the regulations from the government. So that really makes things difficult. And the same goes actually also for the IC makers. There's a lot of people, TSMC, and they're setting up in the US, Samsung. But yeah, if you cannot fly people back and forth, that makes things a lot harder.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. So I'm conscious of the time here, but I just want to kind of maybe in closing ask kind of, yeah, and Carl, you just offered some good advice there on the firmware engineers. You know, what's your best advice or your best outlook for this year's Chinese New Year's for you know, hopefully everybody has got the warning, they knew it's an annual event and they prepared for this long ago. That being the best case scenario, what's the advice heading into it and coming out of it?
Yeah, I think from my end, it's transparency, communication. Those are very, very key, right? The lack of travel, you can't see the body language of your customers, your partners, it makes it difficult, but you have to make a concerted effort being even more transparent, especially when we have the customers trusting us saying, okay, anything below 5,000%, you could go ahead and buy. They have to trust us on that because for other manufacturers, they can just say, oh, it's 4,999%. So you have to have that transparency in place and really trust the people you work with. Otherwise, soon enough, this long-term relationship you built, it will crumble. So we want to make sure that continues. And I think as long as you're communicating, acting fast, having the resources in place, you can compete against time in a sense. But it's a matter of resources because it's cash. I think you have to have enough people. My feeling is that soon, with the interest rates going up, there will be a lot of issues in the entire industry because everyone's hoarding a lot more inventory. When you don't have that ability to turn and you have one component shortage, your customer's not paying you, and then you can't pay your suppliers, that stops. And then there will be a flood of bankruptcies in a sense. So
yeah, well, what you could hope for is that there's going to be a bit of a bullwhip effect where people have placed orders with 3 different vendors and hoping that one of them comes true. But then once they have what they need, then they will cancel the other orders. And so suddenly there may be a glut of cheap components everywhere. That's what we're hoping for.
Yeah. Well, you know, just to follow up on an issue, and I picked up on this during my recent tour to Europe and talking to EMS companies over there, and it was What I want to ask about is the role of distribution in their performance during this, because you both are talking about, and Carl, especially going directly, spot buys means you're not going through, right, the authorized channel so much, you're just getting what you can, which obviously injects risk into that as well, depending on who these people are. How would you assess kind of distribution during this time and how they've been performing?
Well, I think even a lot of the distributors themselves, they're going through the spot buy market to buy. That shows you how dire the situation is right now.
A lot of distributors are being caught out by the IC vendors themselves because they sell directly to their top 10 customers, and they don't bother even with the small fry anymore.
Mm.
Yeah. So it's tough. And I think the biggest winners right now are the companies on the ground doing quality checks. I think one of your frequent guests, Mark, as
yes,
well.
with White Horse, yeah.
He's doing very well. I think everyone's going through him to check on all the components, because not only are we talking about spot buy components that's unauthorized, we're talking about really old date codes as well, 2006 date codes being used. How do you validate? There's a lot of risk in the supply chain for sure.
Yeah. Case, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, you can't really go and I mean you can X-ray on and all that and do research on a component level basis, but that's going to take a lot of time, obviously, and you cannot do that for all components. So 100% testing is really the best assurance. But then if you have old components or so, you can see degradation earlier, and that is something that is hard to caution against.
Yeah, good. Well, gentlemen, thank you. This is, I'm always, every time Chinese New Year comes around, both by the impact of it and how we as an industry kind of prepare for it and hopefully get smarter with it every year. And this is clearly a very challenging time. Carl, I hope that your previous forecast that this will be the worst one ever proves to be true, because that means that everything's, we're getting better next year at this time, right? So, yeah, so
but should we be wishing you the worst, a worse Chinese New Year? That's no way to end the show.
Yeah, that's bad mojo, isn't it, Case? No, but I think a lot of
Carl, I wish you the worst.
Well, I think everybody's ready to put this in the rear view mirror, right? Everybody's looking to, I think, fortunately, as an industry and as people all in every country, we're all kind of gotten a little desensitized to this, and we're just we're not surprised by the next bad news these days, right? And it's, unfortunately, it comes fast and furious. And I think everybody is ready. I think as I've talked to people about their forecasts, when is the supply chain out? Everybody was starting with first half of 2022, but that was a year ago. Now we see all these forecasts, ones are getting better, extending into 2023. So, so I think people are ready to to put it bluntly, to deal with some more shit before it gets better, right? And I think, that's probably the right attitude to have heading into this. So, anyway, gentlemen, thank you both. I wish you a good year of the tiger. I hope it's proved to be a good one for both of you, and hopefully we catch up again later this year.
Have an excellent tiger year then. Let's say it that way.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thanks, Eric.